17th, 2014. So first of all, we'll have roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Clute.
Here.
Board Member Garr. Here. Board Member Grove.
Here.
Board Member Kastner.
Here.
Board Member LaRock.
Here.
Board Member McMurray.
Here. Here.
Member Miller. Board Member Price.
Here.
Board Member Reed.
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you, Ann. Approval of agenda. I had a couple of comments, and I'm wondering if I'm seeing some things on this agenda that we haven't seen before. So either Ann or Dennis, if you could explain exactly the ID numbers, the attachments. Are we seeing those from now on, or what?
We are seeing those from now on. I'll let
Okay.
Ann explain. She knows this much better than I.
Okay.
So we have a new system called Legistar. So basically, when we generate the agenda, staff members also generate like staff communications. So those ID numbers are tied to like their staff reports, which you receive copies of, or any of their attachments. So basically, when the public goes online to view the agenda, they can click on that, and they will also see the same information you have.
Oh, okay. Good. The other question I have is that it looks like the COAs are under staff comments reports rather than under public hearings.
No, they're actually under public hearings. You would see the ID number, it says 293, so, and where it says continued from. So they are both under public hearings.
Not what we see.
Yeah, that's not what's on our,
We see.
they're under comments reports.
There's a different agenda, which,
We didn't get?
yes, so they are under public hearing.
Could we,
I can get you copies of them.
okay. Also, if you wanted to add the work plan?
Yeah, the work plan, I think, from now on will be under chair when I talk, but probably from now on, it should always, every month be on here. So that would be the only... You okay? The only change I would have would be to put the COAs under public hearing.
And it is on the correct, on
Okay.
the agenda that was released. I think the agenda you received was not, it was before it was completed.
So how do we know that?
Early one.
How,
Yeah.
how do we know that? I hear you tell us that, but that's not what we're looking at.
And I can't respond to that. I didn't put that.
So
together.
that I just want to say that puts us in a really difficult position and situation.
So what do you,
So you're asking us to approve something that we really don't
So the
have the
agenda
correct
that
copy
was
of.
with their
packets? Okay.
was different from what the agenda was online.
Online. Correct. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's partially just a factor of timing as much as anything that we, in terms of when we get all this into the system. So, but I'm not remembering exactly, so I apologize why that happened.
Well, the agenda really was not finalized
Until
Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon, that's
and
right.
The packet had already gone out.
Went out. That's right. That's right. That's what happened. So.
Okay, so for purposes for this evening, since this is all we have to work from, we'll just move that up under public hearing.
And it
Yes.
is. So I apologize for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do too. So.
Does anybody else have any comments on the agenda? Approval as amended? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Minutes to be approved. So under here where it has the ID 14334, we do not find that anywhere on the minutes, right? That number?
That's correct.
Yeah.
It is just a cross-reference.
The cross-reference, as well as the attachments were not.
The attachment really would be the the regular meeting, the draft minutes from the October 20th meeting, which you should have all received a copy of.
Okay,
So that's what we will, or you will be voting on.
okay, so we'll be
Yeah,
seeing
and
that
that's
on all the agendas from now.
14334.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, change is always difficult, you know.
It is.
Especially for a bunch of preservationists.
Okay, any comments on the minutes? The only comment I have on, under roll call, also present, Sonia should be listed. Sonia was at the meeting last month. Sonia Ellingbo. And then I had the same question on numbers and attachments, but I think you answered that. Does anybody have anything else?
We lost our line, our row numbers.
Yeah. Is that anything, I don't know whether, can you do that in the future, Ann?
I
Put
will-
numbers down here so when we reference. Yeah.
So the numbers, the line numbers and draft.
So it's easier for us when we're talking about it, we can refer to a page and a number of the line.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion to? I
have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Is this then, are we I thought that the video was the actual record of the meeting.
It is, but we still need to do kind of summarized minutes of what took place at the meeting.
So, okay, so that's what we're
But
really
basically
approving.
when, and I should have, yeah, on the last page, you see that I've hereby certified that I've reviewed the video recording. So I actually watched the meeting again online.
thing.
And then,
I'm so sorry.
just basically, the minutes too are just kind of a condensation.
Okay, I'm just, wanting to be clear that that's what we're doing.
How many copies?
Okay, is there anything else? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
I apologize. Can I get the first and the second again? I didn't.
Pam moved.
I moved.
And who seconded?
I second.
Okay. Okay. Scheduled, unscheduled appearances? Any unscheduled appearances? Yes. Hi there, if you could state your name and address, that'd be great.
I'm going to see if the projector will work too. I don't know pronounce. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live about 3 blocks, actually a block south of here, and on Nevada Street. And I wanted to come tonight. I apologize. I'm not familiar with you folks or the way you work. I've certainly attended planning board and city council, and also the Urban Renewal Authority, which has been meeting on the Mondays opposite you. And therefore, you can't attend their meetings, and they haven't attended yours. And so tonight I thought I would try to talk about those because they canceled their meeting tonight. They've approved 4 urban renewal plans. Oh, I'm sorry. You probably want to start the timer for me.
That's right, 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. They've approved 4 urban renewal plans with somewhere between 450 acres of Littleton in 4 areas. That's a lot of property and a lot of parcels for a city our size. So a concern I have is about the financial or economic impact. I don't think we can sustain anything like that. There really should be some kind of limit or cap on those areas. I think they're too large. But 2 of them are passed by City Council. 2 of them are under consideration by planning board now. But I don't think you're considering them, and therefore I think I can talk to you about them. On the screen, you can see the Santa Fe area, and I'm not sure how well I can draw this, but it actually got a little darker. But along Santa Fe, it starts basically at Essex House and goes almost to the Mineral Light Rail Station on the west side of the street and some on the east side of the street. It also includes the Columbine Square Shopping Center at Federal and Bellevue. And then the two that are remaining under consideration are Littleton Boulevard, pretty much between Windermere and Broadway, and then the corner around Broadway, large portions of that. I mention it to you because the Littleton Boulevard area has a lot of mid-century modern buildings in it. The mid-century modern buildings of Littleton Boulevard are one of the 5 top most endangered places in Colorado for 2014 by the Colorado Preservation Inc. organization. I wonder what you folks think of this. I think those buildings are important to the future of Littleton and even the Denver metro area. They make us different from all the other surrounding satellites of Denver. And when you combine Main Street with Littleton Boulevard, you get this great mid-century modern on the east and the older historical buildings on the west, and the Carnegie Library and Courthouse. That's precious. And if anybody in Littleton understands my eagerness and enthusiasm about it, I hope that you do. And I'm concerned that the urban renewal plans do not protect them. I don't think the city did its homework before the plans are there, and I'm hoping that after the fact, the Historic Preservation Board and the Planning Board can do some things to help protect the parcels and historic buildings and sites and the integrity of the whole Littleton Boulevard Main Street area and preserve it for our future. And it's just something I found out recently. I didn't realize this. We used to have historic designations almost annually, and then in 2009 they stopped. I don't know why that is, but if we need them ever, we need them now. I don't know how the process works, but I'm sure you folks are instrumental in doing it. And this is a list of buildings that could be in there, and then the mid-century modern on Littleton Boulevard should be added. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your work on this board. I grew up here, and Littleton's important to me. So I appreciate your work for the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
We have copies of those? Get copies of that?
Sure, although they came from Dennis. And so...
I believe, are those the historic districts and the landmark buildings?
Oh,
And
we already
I
have
think
them.
we have those.
Yeah.
And I think, Pam, just so you know, we have been talking about those buildings in there and how to proceed with that. So
Well, thank you.
we're aware of what's going on in there.
And I think there's more people than me who will support you and do what we can to help if we can.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Any other unscheduled appearances? Okay. Then I'll open the public hearing. And we actually have 2 COAs, which I'm going to combine into one, I think, since they're very much related. Did you have something to say?
I was not at the last meeting, and because it's a continued public hearing, I would like actually to be able to participate in the discussion, but I'd like to set aside my role as a voting board member and ask that Sharon Garr stand in for me tonight since she was at the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
We
Marty?
might consider both of them at the same time, but can we hear the one we haven't heard first?
Okay, I was going to just have one hearing where Dennis can address both and the applicant can address both.
Yeah, when we
that
talked to the city attorney, we talked to Kristen, she said she'd be comfortable with a single public hearing and a single motion, even if the chair decided that was the way to go, because they're so interrelated. The application
That's
together,
true.
it's, the use is interrelated.
But we
so.
haven't heard any of the information on the second.
Can I interject,
That's
though?
entirely new.
Because we have some board members that are voting on the continued application and some that are only voting on the new, I do think we should treat them as two separate motions so that Board Member Reed and Board Member LaRock can still vote on the second application.
So should we hear them separately or just vote on them separately?
I think that's cleaner, but that's up to you. My concern would be that we have two separate motions because we have different people voting. But I'll leave it to you.
I understand what you're saying. Maybe the easiest thing then would be to treat them as two different ones.
We could, or we can, I think what I'm hearing is we could go ahead and do two.
Okay, I think it would expedite things and
hearing.
and then just have the vote on each one.
Right.
Okay. So,
Margie, just to
Yes.
repeat, Chuck, I'll be planning to do the same thing because I wasn't here last month, that I'd like to be participate, but I won't be voting.
okay,
And just
on the first one.
To clarify for future meetings, if you do have an opportunity to watch the video after the meeting, you could then go ahead and vote. That would be considered your.
I know that, and I'm sorry I couldn't.
That's right. You guys are busy. So.
Well, just for the record, I'll open the public hearing on the COAs for 2670 West Main Street for partial demolition and reconstruction of the rear of the Blue Ribbon Stables building, and also 2680 West Main Street, which would include the alterations to the front facade, the partial demolition of the rear of the building, and the addition of a partial second floor and outdoor deck. So we'll start with staff, with Dennis. Thank you.
Mike, if I can have the projector on. Please. Great, thank you. I see it coming. I'm sorry, not the projector, the computer. Sorry. Thank you, the laptop. Thank you. Okay. So we have two certificates of historic appropriateness, and we'll have two motions. They are interrelated and two adjoining buildings. The second one is really being done because of the uses that are being proposed for the first building. And so they're definitely interrelated to what's happened. As you know, that we went through the COA for both buildings together in 2012 and got that COA approved, and that was to go through and make the changes that were made now. So what we see now in terms of what has been constructed is what was approved as a COA, and so the application now is to make some changes to the west building, particularly the facade of the west building, different than what was approved in 2012. So, but for a new use, and we may see something similar to that for the east building if they have another use as well. So I think that as uses come in and they need to have specific needs, we may see that again. So we have one. The first one's a continuation for the Bussard Motor Company building. We had this public hearing. We started in October, and then we continued the public hearing. That's, as Margie said, it's a proposal to rehabilitate the building for use as a restaurant, to demolish a portion of the rear of the building, and then add a new partial second floor addition and an outdoor deck. The second COA is the one that you're hearing for the first time tonight, and that is for the Blue Ribbon Stables building at 2670 West Main Street. And that's a proposal really just to demolish and rebuild a portion of the rear of that building and reuse that area as an outdoor space for the restaurant next door at 2680. Nothing else is being done to that building. No other changes are being made to the front facade. No changes are being made to the roof. No changes are being made to the interior other than a portion of the rear of that building is being demolished and a new rear wall is being constructed to match the rear wall at 2680 West Main Street. The exhibits that I have tonight are a completed application form, a cover letter describing the project and signed by the owner, a list of owners of adjoining properties, a completed COA application checklist, a set of drawings that includes a cover sheet with signature block photos and drawings that present in detail the proposed project, a staff communication regarding the first application, a second staff communication regarding the second application, a memorandum from the city's architectural consultants, a proof of publication signed by the deputy city clerk, an affidavit of publication signed by the publisher, and photographs indicating that the property was posted as required. So those are the exhibits tonight, and they overlap a little bit because of the nature of these two public hearings. As you can remember from last time, we have down at 20, this is the X on Main Street running east-west. On the south side of Main Street, 2680 is the X, 2670 is immediately to the east of that. And I think it's interesting when we get into this next one, we can start to see a little bit more in terms of what's happening around it, what happens across the street. The aerial photo to the right, I think, becomes important as you get some of the discussions in terms of how does the second floor deck affect the surrounding properties, what happens when the rear of those two buildings is demolished, how do they interact with the alley. So the two X's on both those slides are 2670 on the right and 2680 on the left. And so the larger building with the skylights, you can see, is Broussard Motor, and then Blue Ribbon Stables is on the right. This is COA for the most recent rehabilitation was approved in 2012, as we said, and that's what we see now. As you may remember, they went through and changed the window form, added an additional door, made some fairly significant changes to the front, but again, the board was happy that what they saw was consistent with the original form in terms of void and solids, keeping those original openings, and that's kind of the similar discussion to what you had at the last public hearing. The current application for a certificate of historic appropriateness is a proposal to rehabilitate the Broussard Motor Company building 2680, partially demolish a portion of the rear of both buildings, and add a new partial second floor addition and an outdoor deck. So the policy question for the board is, does the proposed project meet the criteria for certificate of historic appropriateness? The staff and our consultants have reviewed the proposals, met with the applicants, and gone through the 4 criteria which have to be met in order to approve a COA as specified in Section 4614 of the Historic Preservation Code. The first criteria is for a certificate of historic appropriateness as specified in Historic 4614, the proposed work would not detrimentally alter, destroy, or adversely affect any architectural or landscape feature which contributes to its original historic designation and is otherwise in conformance with any applicable adopted design guidelines. The second one is the proposed work is visually compatible with the designated historic structures located on the property in terms of design, finish, material, scale, mass, and height. The third is the proposed work is visually compatible with the development on adjacent properties. And the fourth is, in the case of partial demolitions, the partial demolition is required for the renovation, restoration, or rehabilitation of the structure and impacts on the historic importance and architectural integrity of the structures located on the property have been mitigated to the greatest extent possible. We went through these and we outlined in our staff reports what we were thinking, the process we'd gone through, and why we think that this is consistent with these criteria. And we're certainly happy to answer any questions about that. And as you get into the discussion, certainly happy to, and our consultants are as well, because we certainly have had a lot of discussion about this ourselves. But we are very much in support of this project and happy to answer your questions for it. So, okay.
Thank you, Dennis. Are there any questions for Dennis right now? Okay. Or our consultants, for that matter? No?
I have one, Margie.
Okay.
Could you go back to item B there, Dennis, or perhaps Fred and Dina? The proposed work is visually compatible with the designated historical structures located on the property in terms of design, finish, material, scale, mass, and height. Could you just kind of go through the design criteria that you use to determine that?
Yeah. Fred, do you want to do that? Dina, you want to do it? Okay.
And I'm sorry, Mike, which one is that?
It's on
B?
page 4 of the Broussard staff communication. On item B at the bottom of the
Okay,
page.
at the bottom of the page, that's what I thought, okay.
That sounds like something I need to participate in too. So. Sorry, which page, Mike?
Page 4, Dennis.
Okay.
On the 14-293.
Okay.
And bottom of the page, it's item B.
Okay. So it's okay. Yeah, I'll start off and let Fred and Dina take over too, and Glenn can chime in on this as well. That the work on Broussard particularly is the second floor addition. You know, we're not seeing any significant changes to the front, form in our minds. The brick is staying the same. The openings are staying the same. We're having the major columns stay in place. So we're seeing a change in the windows. We're seeing a change in some of that, but it's consistent with what was there. They were display windows. There were garage doors. So there were forms that were there. And when we look at the second floor, the deck and the addition themselves, because the addition is set back, we're comfortable with that, having very minimal visual impact. And because the deck is up above, and then I think what the board asked for last time was this darker color. And in my mind, that works well. So I'd be interested to hear what the board thinks tonight. But again, I think that it's interesting just because kind of discussion with Sharon brought up last time, because it is going to a contemporary material, a set of contemporary materials, particularly on the second floor, but we still saw it as compatible with those. So, Fred and Dina are more the expert on that in terms of why, you can ask for compatible materials that are contemporary versus historic.
Sure. Fred Andreas. So, with the addition, specifically, we were following the guidelines, the City of Littleton's guidelines. And in there, they talk about relative scale and proportion, fenestration, windows, doors, that type thing, openings. Overall massing, bulk plane, verticality, things like that. So we spent a considerable amount of time with staff and the client discussing the types of windows, the mullions of the windows, mimicking the existing as much as possible. Of course, the existing in the front is being replaced because of the functionality of the use changing. But we went, because those newer windows that are in the building currently are not considered to be historic, we went back to references of the 1940s and tried to mimic the fenestration on the original building and then copy that same pattern and mullion representations on the new building. So yes, we have what looks like garage doors up on the second floor, but it does mimic the original idea of the garage doors on the first floor. And window openings, we were very careful about the placement of transom windows, the size and proportion of transom windows, the punched window openings, vertical mullions, horizontal mullions. They were all following the original style of that early 20th century commercial building. And as to the siding, my first reaction on the siding was, it could be brick or it could be this, the horizontal metal. And the horizontal metal's cadence, proportions, scale is very close to the brick, gives the same kind of look, shadow pattern as the brick, but it's a modern material. So in the guidelines, it also says that we don't want to try to reenact something. We want to try to make it clearly in the early 21st century. So the idea of a change in material and a change of the symmetry, for example, yet hearkening back to the original design tenets of early 20th century commercial, I think we're all fulfilled very nicely in this, and I think it worked quite well. It was the result of considerable conversation and back and forth, and what came of it, I think, is certainly defensible within the guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Bet.
Dennis, a question for you. On our the cover memo that you sent us, we were to have included in our packet the review of the post-COAs from the city's development review and historic design consultants. Is that the same memo that we got?
It's the same memo we got last
In
time.
October?
Yes, it sure is. Uh-huh.
Okay. There wasn't a new one after
It was not
that.
new, no.
Okay. The applicant, would you like to do your presentation again? Thank you for coming again.
Excuse me. Can you speak into the mic, please? Thank you.
And you might state your name again.
Raymond Dollet, architect. Basically, I've gone through your 10 items from last time, and here's a kind of, Dennis also summarized them, but I'll summarize them kind of differently. Your number 3 and your number 10, number 3 being replace the metal coiling garage doors on the bar extension with glass garage doors, and also simplify that element has been done. There's no eyebrow left on the bar extension, and it's still flat metal as opposed to the horizontal metal, but it's the same color as the horizontal metal. We can pull out the sheets of that if you wish. So,
Ray,
yes.
just a quick question over here. You call out glass garage doors and glass roll-up door. Are they meant to be the same, or what's the difference? On your elevations?
Just the bad word.
Oh, okay.
They're all garage doors.
Okay.
They're all pop in. You can't roll up a glass door. So you can see on this sheet the simplified, the glass garage door and simplified siding and shape, and also on the rear elevation. And the west elevation. So that was that item.
So they'll all be the same type, they're just different sizes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, your items number 5, 7, and 9, 5 being explore the option of a rendering with a solid wall enclosing the barrel roof up the deck, and update the railing and make exterior railings as transparent as possible. All these items work together because I met with the building department, and we've come up with a new, my suggestion, a new detail for the deck where it's a concrete deck and not porous anymore, pouring water through to the barrel. So I do not need the parapet anymore because the fire codes let you, if the top of it is 4 feet back, a hard material or non-combustible material, then the parapet goes away. So I no longer need the 30-inch parapet here on the railing, and so it's more transparent, and that's solved problems, other problems also. So.
And the color of the railing is
the same as the trim on that floor. It's the
lighter color.
Slightly lighter color.
Yeah. Okay.
Same as the trim on the second floor, the frames. Okay.
Relative to that, Ray, excuse me, on design sheet 13, you show a different joist structure than on the original drawings. They were about 2 feet apart before, and that's owing to the new concrete deck as opposed to a porous deck.
Yeah, it's steel all along the west underneath and steel going back to the middle bearing, let's say.
Okay.
But it's like 4 feet apart in that case.
And then owing to the siding down below, then that's not visible from below. Okay.
It's not visible.
Thanks.
Okay. From the list, your number 1, 2, 4, and 8. Provide colors and values that blend with the existing building. Update the renderings with actual and proposed colors and materials. Replace the 12-foot view with pedestrian level view of the second floor, and clarify the second floor siding, direction, and scale. On all the drawings, this is all represented. The color is now, back to that here. The horizontal siding and the flat siding are the copper brown, and we'll get to this, we mentioned this before, the frames upstairs would be the medium bronze, and downstairs on the first floor, nothing's changed in terms of the frames and the spandrels. And it is represented in the rendering, if I could get to that here. So now the rendering is more representative of the real colors that they're going to be, which is hard to do here. The rear, the west side, and the front. Okay. Then we have number 6, address the questions and comments of the consultants. This basically, the first one was all revised and detailed. There's details of the recessed entry. On sheet 15, it's changed a lot. It's been redetailed. You can't see that far. We've used hardy board on the ceiling, and it comes out and stops at the plate up the top, and the frame of the door and its side lights is literally covering up the one nasty part that's there still. And then we, on the part of the brick where one type of brick meets the other type of brick, we've covered up with hardy board of the same color, very thin band, and it ends right at the where the upper soffit ends of the new hardy board here. Another item from the consultants with color of the second floor frames. Now it's now medium bronze, and it goes on the copper colored brown siding. So it is different than the first floor, and it kind of drops back a little, just a little smoother, let's say. And the third item on the consultants' comments was the handrail color, and now it's the medium bronze, which is the same color as those frames on the second floor. And on the rear rendering, I have shown slightly the wall around the back area here. Kind of shows here, and on the site plans, which went somewhere. On the site plan, the wall now continues around the entire area. There's a gate, and then there's a trash enclosure also with its own gate onto the alley. And that's all just kind of verbal requests that weren't on the list.
Anything else, or are you ready for questions?
That covers the questions or the comments
Okay.
from last time.
Well, you go forward, or are you ready for questions from the board?
Ready.
Okay. Did you have your hand up, Chuck?
I have a question about design sheet 6. Design sheet 6 is the west elevation. And the big blank space right in the center of the elevation, what is that?
That's the adjoining building that's now is in the rendering. which wasn't on the rendering last time. There's a building actually practically attached to this building in that width, on the west.
Okay.
What other questions do we have?
It might be rendering.
I do.
Oh, go ahead.
Ray, if you look at that same elevation on the front, and I don't know, I apologize for not being here for your first presentation, but...
On the front elevation or the west?
If you look at the west, and we'll also look at the front, but
Okay.
I have a question that's actually twofold, and maybe you discussed this in the last meeting, but how did you decide where to put the upper deck and railing in comparison to that front facade? How far back?
It was discussed with the consultants a lot. Originally, I had it right behind the brick, and we ended up moving it more than 3 feet back from the front, just to drop it back a little. And again, you practically won't see it if you're close to walking on the sidewalk on that side.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and I just wondered, if that's going to be, it's a technical question, but it's going to be so close to the backside of that wall and the roofing that would we ever see where that you might have an issue with drainage along there that you'd have to end up tying back into the existing wall, and I wouldn't want to see that.
I'm going to have a drop down. There is
enough room to work
for
in
water.
there.
I'm going to have it drop down and square off and go into one of the interior drains.
Okay. And I guess my concern, and again, it's not a design concern, but it's more of a practical concern in how somebody would get in between those two, the walls to actually do that work. And I mean, I actually would prefer if it was even further back, just so that there's more relief off that parapet, so that it really doesn't feel like it's just backing up to it. I think it was a good idea to move it back, and I wondered if, one, practically, and then two, aesthetically, if it wouldn't be better to move back even a little bit farther.
Again, I don't have any problem getting the water off.
Okay.
And there's a space between the barrel vault and this new deck that's accessible. I mean, all our drains are going to be there. Some of the vent pipes going to run through there before they go up into the building and out, so they don't come up through the deck or anything like that.
My concern is that if you run into trouble in the future there, that some sort of a flashing detail would end up tying those two together, and you wouldn't see that separation as well. But that's only my concern.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Chuck?
I don't have a question for the applicant, but I do have a design for the design consultants, if we can pull them back,
Okay.
but not for the applicant.
Okay, when you're done. Anything else that you have right now?
Only if you want me to explain the second, I don't know which is first now, the second COA.
Yes, go ahead, because we're doing the hearing all at once. That's right. Thank you. And then I'll open it to the public when he's done. Thank you.
Let's see here. Well, if I could find the other sheet, we'd be in good shape. Yeah.
And which sheet is that?
We're on sheet 2A,
Yeah,
and then we'll be
2A.
on 2B. So we're going to remove a total of 2,000 something square feet, 2,047 square feet on both buildings, so we can add 2,000 plus square feet on the second floor. This is in a historic district. If we keep the same square feet, we don't need any additional parking or any parking at all in this case, and that's the main purpose. So then the site plan will be like this after the demolition of the rear. And at this point, we obviously have to rebuild the back wall, and it's going to be of the same siding with one door, and anybody doing anything here would have to come back to the board for more issues when it becomes either rented or it can't be a different owner. We just changed the entire ownership to one owner, so we had no building code problems on the east. So, I mean, it was always one owner, but now it's one property, one.
I have a question.
Catherine.
On the east property, what's that section, that 2,000 square feet? What is that now? Is it just empty space, or is there a...
The entire east space?
Yeah.
It's vacant.
I know the entire building's vacant.
Yeah.
But is that just part of the open space that you're just going to make smaller?
What is this removed space going to become?
No. What's there now that you're going to take away?
Is it the receiving
just gonna
area
move-
that she's talking about, this
I think-
building?
Oh, it's
she's trying to
just-
figure out which building it is.
It's building.
If you read in the staff report, they're demolishing the rear 11 feet, right, for a
Right.
total
Yes.
of
And
four.
what's-
And then when you add all of this together with the building to the west, that's where the
So they're
2,000.
gonna demolish
Oh, that's where the
47.
because see the arrow, never mind.
Oh,
The arrow,
okay.
I think it's all of the
Sorry.
striped
Didn't mean to
area.
throw
No
you off.
problem. So,
Yeah.
so that's part of the other COA.
Right. So the other COA is just taking the 11 feet, demolishing that 11 feet, and then building the
Putting a
wall, the rear wall. Okay, any
I have one more question.
questions?
Can you just clarify what the material and color of the 6-foot wall in the back of the building is? Since it doesn't show up in the red.
That was stucco. That was going to be stucco. I'm not sure I got to the color. I might
I don't know the colors of it.
not have.
On 2B.
Oh, wait, I did, yes.
Just this.
I had that somewhere else.
I think in the colored rendering, it looks like a brown, but I don't know if that's the color
Well, it's,
on 18, excuse me.
well, the wall's not really shown there.
Unless this is the wall, isn't it? This brown.
It's hard to tell.
Well, the intent was to make it one of the browns. I suspect the dark one.
So it'll be complementary to one of the existing colors in the building?
Yes.
Okay.
What we might do on that, if there's anything else like this where you don't have the information now, rather than having the applicant come back again, you could actually, if you're comfortable with it, give the authority to the consultants and staff to say, to approve that final color. We could do something like that. So this or any other case.
And I think if it's a color complementary to the colors in the building, I'm certainly fine with that. Everybody okay? Well, we'll make that a condition. Any other questions?
Yeah, Sheet 18 shows that west wall here, Margie.
Yeah, right.
So that, like a brown color on that.
Yeah, we were looking at that. Hard to tell.
It looks like a fairly different color than the
Yeah.
building.
Okay, I think that's all for now. And I'll open it up to any,
Hold on a second. On the what is it, 2670 portion of the property, you're not doing anything with that right now? At the moment, other than demolishing?
2670.
Yeah.
We're not doing anything except the back wall.
Except the back wall?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are
That's
adding.
what we're approving?
Yes. I don't know if it has to be approved. We are doing services underground services, like sewer and water, but nothing exposed.
Okay. Nothing to the facade, nothing else?
Just the rear.
And that's just pending
A tenant or.
future use? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
So we're clear.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to any public comment. Did you have a comment? If you'd like to step forward and give us your name and address and your comment.
So my name is Tim Vandal. I'm here with my wife, Sandy Vandal. She is the owner and proprietor of Vandal Antiques at 2675 West Alamo Avenue, which if you could pull up the map, please, with the parking lot. Do you have that handy?
If I can have the computer on again.
So the building directly to the bottom would be her building, which is an antique store. Then the parking lot directly behind the building is the parking lot where all the employees park. To the west is another 2 stores, and then on the very end are Carl and Terry Pappert's building, which is the large building that faces west. So our concerns at this point were, one, is there going to be a back entrance, which it looks like there is, but maybe that's for fire safety?
Can I need you to come up to the microphone.
Are you talking about a back entrance for customers to come in and out?
Correct. Yes.
I don't believe so.
Fire exit? Okay. Okay. 2 would be the deliveries that are coming into the back of the alley. The alleyway is already fairly busy as it is. If a delivery truck's in the back of that building, that's going to effectively block off that parking lot. And that's, as far as I can tell, the only place that you could accept deliveries unless you accepted them out front, which I don't think is very reasonable. And then 3, I don't know if this board has any concerns regarding parking or if that's even in your wheelhouse. Parking's a big part of this issue. So would that be a city and county issue versus the historic district?
Glenn, can you answer that?
Sure. Parking is a city issue, and because they are not adding additional square foot, they are not required to add parking.
Okay, now they're not adding additional square foot for the current restaurant.
Right.
But the other section of the building is up for possible lease, correct?
That's correct.
So if that were up for possible lease, would they need to add extra parking at that point?
No, sir.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Whatever the current rule is, there is a parking issue in downtown Littleton. I think that needs to be looked at by the city, and we'll certainly bring that up with Debbie and the council members.
Okay.
I understand that you have to deal with what you have, but it's a big issue. So where are they going to park? I'm curious.
Well, I know the applicant's looking at some other alternatives for parking off-site. I don't know that they've come to a realization of how to do that, but per the city ordinance, they're not required to provide additional parking. So,
are you looking at other options for that? That is going to be an issue long haul.
That's the owners. I've heard through the city that they are.
Okay. Okay. Sandy, were there any other questions you had? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board?
I think we have one more person to testify.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chairwoman, I believe there's one more member of the public. Did you want to testify?
Okay. Pam? Yes. You may come forward.
I'm still Pam Chadbourne, and I live at Nevada and Crestline in downtown, 3 blocks south of this location. And I have a couple concerns about this, and I'm not familiar with the guidelines, so probably I can't finesse this in, but great, thank you. And I probably can't point at it, and I don't have a little red thing. The building with the barrel roof, which I believe is where they're going to replace the second story, is right next to the Bemis Library at the end of the street. And then on Curtis Street, there's another building that's built the same way. It's where the Pottery Design Studio and Grandpa's Attic are in the front on Curtis. For some reason, it doesn't show up on this map at all, but it's built the same way. It's got the same barrel design. It's probably the same size. It's got the same facade. So the two buildings, one is north-south and the other one's east-west on that same block. And when I walk on the block, I see both buildings, and I feel that I am in an authentic area where both buildings were built at the same time. And one was a stables or something, and another one, I don't know what it was. But I feel that there was some historic use there, and that both buildings were built then. So the loss that occurs to Littleton downtown is suddenly this thing has a weird little hat, two-story hat. The barrel roof is gone. It no longer matches the other building, which it matches now, in which it's very easy to see when you walk around. The guidelines, if they don't have continuity with other properties nearby, I don't know how to make that work. But to me, as a person walking around downtown, that's what I see. How does it go with Bemis Library? How does it go with the other building that matches it on the block? It goes really well. I appreciate that a lot of work was done on this design, and I appreciate that there's a comment that we move forward with a nod to the past. But I don't see why you demolish 2,000 feet in the back to add 2,000 feet vertically, other than, the deck thing. There's already 2 decks with murals and with the tavern. Again, I live downtown. I don't think we need more decks. There's already noise on Sunday night. You want a battle of the bands? I know you can't control this, but this use in this second story shouldn't be there. They should fit into the existing building, have a flat structure, make everybody fit in there. I don't see the need for the volleyball court, and fit it into the place that already fits the block. That's what I think is appropriate for the city and downtown and for the neighborhood and the community. I don't know if the guidelines help you do that. But that's my concern, and my computer is dead. I would have printed these pictures for you. I swear to you, though, if you go there and walk around, you will see the 2 buildings there. The other long one is by the Elks. The Elks are on the corner, kitty corner to this, on that block. And then the other barrel roof with the same facade where Grandpa's Attic and the Pottery Studio are on Curtis Street is right there. And I know City Council heard from, in their economic forum a year ago, heard from a couple of cities that had jazzed up their alleys, and they love that idea, and I do too. But if this building is replaced, you'll never be able to see the way those 2 buildings are the same, and that they were built at that time and had those uses, and we'll never be able to refer to them that way. And these signposts that we're supposed to have that harken back to the historic base, historic uses of these buildings. It'll be gone forever. So I don't know if the guidelines now allow it, but I don't want this change to these 2 buildings, especially the long one with the barrel roof. Leave it the way it is. Let them fit their use into it. I think it'd be just fine, and they'd make just fine profits. So that's my 4 minutes worth. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments, Pam. Do we have any questions of the board of Pam?
I think Chuck had.
Chuck, did you have a question for Pam, Chuck? No. Did you have a response at all from the applicant?
Projector.
We can see it.
Yeah. In case anybody wants to know why we're all looking down here, we can see there's a thing down here we're looking at.
Ray, is the barrel being exposed on the inside? Yeah.
And the storefront is remaining pretty much intact, changing frames and glass. That was the intent all along, to have the barrel on the inside.
So it'll remain as is on the inside, it's just not on the outside. Okay.
I actually did go walk over there just yesterday. I was looking at the barrel roof myself. And actually, when you're coming from Santa Fe onto Main Street, just before this building is a building that has 2 stories. And so the deck would just blend right into that other building as well as the Masonic Temple as well. And then I went to the back of the alley, and I do, not that we have any jurisdiction over parking, I certainly did question that. But the back is definitely extremely ran down, and I think that adding, the changes to the building, that at first when I first saw the first drawings, I was totally against what you had there. I like these drawings much better. I feel like they blend much better with the building, and that you incorporated a lot of the things that we had tried to incorporate so that it would maintain its historical aspect, as well as putting that modern contemporary up on top of the building. And I did look inside the building and saw the skylights that you're going to be keeping, and could see the barrel roof within inside of it. But I certainly personally think that it would be more of an enhancement to this building. I really am very strong into believing that buildings should stay historical as much as possible, but I feel this one really needs a lot of somewhat improvement. And I think the drawings setting it back like you did, and changing the railing and changing the doors like you have, you've definitely made a big effort to blend it, and I think you've done a really good job with that.
Any other comments before I close the public hearing for?
Just one, Margie, and that is that the barrel roof is not visible, though, from the south side, Ray? I mean, that is completely covered with siding, isn't it now?
Yes.
Okay. I can see the shadow of it behind it, but...
Yeah, that's the trusses are still inside.
They're still,
You can see
okay.
them, and the barrel, everything
right.
from the inside and from the outside of the north, you can look in.
Thanks.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Did you have a
I have some questions for the consultant. Does that?
Sure. I would say, yeah. Chuck, you're going to have to, I never see you down there. Go ahead.
I had a question for the consultant team and or the architects familiar with historic preservation, architecture, and denotation, specifically related to design sheet 7 and then design sheet 8. And I understand the horizontal metal siding on the new addition really establishes that, sets that, demarks that as a new addition. And the form and format of that metal siding, I think, really is going to blend well and work well aesthetically. It's also a long stretch. It's 72 feet. That's a lot of metal wall. And then on the south side, and this is really the historic question, where the demolition is going to happen is not a new structure. It's just a removal of a portion of the existing building that then will be demarked, again, that's my word, with this metal siding that's really different than what's there now. It's different than the brick. And I'm just wondering why, in this case, both for the new structure, which makes sense to me to demark that with the metal siding, but for the existing structure that's just proposed to be demolished, you would use the same materials. And that stretch on the backside for both pieces, there's not a calculation. The sheet 3, I think, or sheet 4 that shows the overall site plan does not include a total linear feet for that entire stretch, but it looks to me to be almost 100 feet, which is a long stretch of the horizontal metal, I think. So I would like to have that question kind of answered. Why you'd use the same material with a demolition and a rehab than you would with a new structure?
First of all, there is a jog.
There is a jog on that back.
There's a jog back there, so it's limited. And secondly,
unless you are looking at it from the antique store and you don't see that little.
Well, but on the other hand, if you're east on the alley and looking at the back of that, you're going to see the siding on the east side of the second floor. So it's all, you're going to see those two things at the same time.
Right.
Kind of tie it together.
So that's what it's the tie together on the two pieces, both the south wall and then that east wall. That's what you're going for, is the east wall of the second floor.
Metal.
Right.
And the south wall of the space that we're not.
So I hear that tie together. I guess my question is, I'm trying to ask, educate me in terms of historic preservation. Why wouldn't you use different materials for what's a new structure, which is the second story addition, versus I don't know what you'd call rehabbing or blending the demolition into the existing structure. And is that just because you're tying the two together and that's it?
We're tying the two together, and the current brick is painted, and there's a garage
Ray?
door back there.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard, Ray.
Sorry.
That's okay. You can talk to that. I got that. You're
okay. The current back is painted brick, and there's a garage door and a couple of other doors, et cetera. I don't think it's representative of what was there 70, 80 years ago.
Okay. Dennis, do you remember a couple of years ago when the facade, when this building got the facade improvements, did they do anything to the back? Nothing at all. Okay. Thanks. That's all I had. All done.
Oh, you had a question?
I just have a couple of questions for the consultant.
Okay.
Oh, sure, please.
Comments also,
Great.
if you need more. So if I can use a really technical historic preservation term, the back of that existing building is ratty. Very painted over brick. It's very difficult to tell what the original urban fabric would be, historic fabric. Another very important issue is that under the guidelines of rehabilitation and the city's guidelines, the rear elevation in that particular mode of preservation is pretty much up for grabs. You can approach that in whatever way you care to. So the idea that we talked about in the design sessions was the continuity of the back and trying to not only make that into a unified kind of approach that reads like the rest of the new 21st century construction, but also makes a continuity of the sides and the back. The idea of the horizontal metal panel I talked about earlier, we thought that it was appropriate rather than reenacting brick for any number of reasons, but the idea of it being a new material and one that this client likes to use, it seemed to make sense with the idea of the things I talked about earlier of cadence and shadow patterns and size of horizontal banding and so on, other than just going to brick. So, I mean, that conversation happened in our very first design session, and I was also of the mind that why are we using metal panel? And when we talked about it, it made lots of sense as opposed to trying to reenact it in brick, which was an option. I think that the one other issue having to do with the metal panel and the brick is my understanding from the board is you would like the metal panel color and texture, hue, and value to be as close to the original front brick facade as possible. That's my understanding. It's also my understanding that you're going to leave it to staff and us consultants to make that final determination once we get a sample board from the client or samples of the actual panel from the client so that we can compare it with the brick. Is that correct? Is that correct?
So.
And then the same would be true of the frames and mullions of the windows, that they're the same with the replacement windows on the first floor as they are with the new windows on the second floor. Is that correct? Right. And that's to be a lighter color. Right. So we'll need to see samples for all of this so that we can compare. I don't think we need a materials board, but something that we can walk over to the building and compare the color of the brick to the color of the panels would be important. So does that answer your question, Mr. Reed?
Thank you.
I have a quick question with regards to that same elevation. Would it be safe to assume that the owner in the future would be coming in for a revision to that building once there's another restaurant, and that we would probably see more glass on that elevation of some sort because they would be also using that back space?
Well, the back space is a volleyball court.
Right.
And I really I'm not privy to what the architect or the client are planning on doing, but certainly any additional changes would land before this board.
Right.
So, but I don't really know what the future plans are.
That's true. Any change to that front facade or even the back would come back for you. So
Okay.
if they do get a tenant in there that wants some additional openings or change out the windows, yes, the board would see that again.
All right. Thank you.
One more point I'd like to make about the barrel vault, the barrel roofs. Those are typical buildings. They were usually used as auto shops in the 1920s and so on. They're all over Denver. You can't see those vaults from the front. You can only see them from the back, as Ray pointed out. I want to also remind you that in the previous iteration that we had the deck suspended off of the existing structure so that you could see the barrel vault. And as you pointed out, that wasn't met with all that much approval. So these new changes simplify the structure, simplify the waterproofing, simplify the issue of the 30 skylights that are up there, and also apparently cleans up the structure in such a way that it's more appealing. The barrel vault will still be able to be viewed from the front, obviously, with those being exposed inside, which is generally the way they were viewed anyway.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
You wait.
Paul had some questions.
Yeah, Paul had a question for you.
Could you respond to the public comment, just the overall thought of removing 2,000 square feet of historic structure and building 2,000 square feet of new, kind of that general approach?
Sure, and so I would say this falls a little bit outside the historic preservation purview, but it's certainly use by right. All of the requirements for this building and transferring equal square footage and parking and height and setbacks and all that have been covered by other departments within the city. So in my mind, this fits within the letter of the law and the intent of the law and the zoning and codes. And so it would certainly be in any forum approvable and acceptable. As far as parking, it's not our purview, and it's certainly an issue for those with higher pay grades than at least me.
And then there were basically 10 points made by, just to clarify, members of the board and not necessarily an agreement by the board. They're kind of outlined on sheet 3 of 7 of the version 2 of the memo. You spent much more time with the applicant than the board has, kind of going through the design, and I know some aspects of the design were discussed and brought forward. Are there any of the 10 points that the board brought up as items yesterday or last month to explore that you feel is a detriment to the design or is going in the wrong direction?
think that the issue of the side of the building as opposed to the floating deck is certainly something that I want you to recall when you're making the decision. If you're asking for my personal opinion, it seems to me at first pass I wasn't convinced about this current solution with the sides coming down, but after looking at it and understanding all the advantages having to do with structure, waterproofing, cleaning up the aesthetics on the side, I think that it's the proper decision. The color, we were talking about railings being transparent as possible. There were a few changes to that, but there weren't that many issues when the railings, they were already fairly transparent, we thought. Colors, which is number one, I think is one of Dina's concerns and also my concern, wanting to make sure that fits within your expectations with value and hue. And I think we have a good idea of how to do that and what you expect. The setback that we were wrangling with in the very front, which was discussed by some of the public comments, was very carefully coordinated with the ending of the fire brick on the front and the step backs on the front facade, and was placed in order to match that very carefully. So the idea of moving that back from that would be more arbitrary than it would be significantly planned ahead of time and vetted. The issue.
So, Dina Zvetlik. The only other item that we noticed that was a change in the drawings, which part of it was requested by the board, was number 10, and the specific component of the windows or the doors, rather than the roll-ups to have them actually be garage doors. But then we also noticed that sort of the eyebrow that was previously around that is now gone. So I don't know if you've noticed that on the drawings, but just wanted to make you aware of that.
Right. What's your thought on removal of the eyebrow versus?
I think we
everything's subjective.
Right. Well, Fred and I were able to talk about that a little, and I think we would prefer to see some sort of eyebrow over that. Again, something thin and simple, not necessarily as bulky as the lower drawing here shows, which was the previous version with the roll-up door, but having something just thinner, just to provide some protection for folks, say, sitting outside in that bar. So that might be a simple resolution. The other question is, and again, this is something that we would look at if we were given the authority with staff to make final colors decisions, is the new flat metal siding that's proposed, to make sure that we look at that color as well.
Can I just make a statement? Part of the reason I think we brought up the eyebrow piece is, at least for me, I was trying to make it so that the building, the historical part of the building is what stood out, not the top of the building. And so I felt like the eyebrow overshadows the historical building. And so I wanted to make sure that that is not what happened. So if they put a thinner eyebrow there, wouldn't it still overshadow the historical part of the building?
I don't think so. Again, the lower drawing, which is the older drawing, which is representing the roll-up area for that previous door to go into, if it was a much thinner and potentially didn't even protrude as much, or at least vertically much thinner eyebrow, I don't think it would be as visually intrusive, because, again, that piece sits back from the historic front facade of the building.
Okay.
And I just one last question concerning the window frame color. I think originally all the window frames were the same color, and then there was kind of a movement to go to a medium bronze on the second floor. Can you kind of explain the thought process there, either the architect or the consultants? I'm just curious. Okay.
Yeah, I think the issue there is that we just really need to see an actual sample board, because even the updated colors that we received, having a PDF that's printed on 3 different printers, you'll have 3 different colors, so it's really hard for us to really understand what those colors are. And so I think simply by actually reviewing an actual sample board will be extremely helpful in making sure that your intent and the intent of the city's guidelines are met.
But if there's a deliberate attempt to change the color, I mean, we could match it, but there's obviously a deliberate attempt. That's kind of what I'm asking. What's the thought process behind not necessarily even tying the two together, basically making them different? I'm just curious.
So the question is whether or not the second floor frames of the windows are a lighter color than the replacement windows on the first floor. Yeah, I really think it's, as Dina just said to me, we really need to see the actual colors to determine that. So the idea behind contrasting colors up above would be it's lighter, it recedes back into your view, it minimizes it, as opposed to them being the same color, it matches, it's congruent. And a lot of that's really Ray's call. It's I think it's I always hesitate choosing colors.
Right.
I always suggest chartreuse and fuchsia.
And I think the challenge is simply the colors that we have noted in the updated application. From what I read, suggests a lighter color for the frames of the upper windows and doors, but yet the darker color that almost matches the current frames of the lower windows for the upper siding and railing. So that's how I read what's currently proposed. But it's still difficult to really know what those colors are because not having the samples.
And of course, the conversations of colors and things receding or coming forward are made moot by the fact that we're looking at a flat two-dimensional line drawing. We can't really see it. And so the model that Ray's office has already produced would certainly be able to give us more information about this idea of receding. We're trying to accentuate the existing historic building, have this be like a light and airy porch as an addition, not the main event. So I think color would be part of it. I also wanted to address the idea of the eyebrow. Certainly the one that is on this lower drawing here is very, very heavy and ponderous, and I would agree with that. But the upper drawing, I think, could be, the geometry could be enhanced by a horizontal break in those two boxes because they are very boxy. I like the idea of a thinner horizontal maybe cover. Practicality, the practicality of it is that it would cover the area where the service from the restaurant is serving the outside. I think it would provide shade. But I think visually the most important issue is with this board is that visually I think it would help to address the fact that the upper geometry is very boxy, and this would help integrate it more, I think, within the overall composition of the site.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first, it was very thick and big, and it's basically all you saw. And my concern was this, of course, in the first drawing, the structure is much closer to the street, and so I was concerned that you would drive by it, and all you're going to see is that big, huge eyebrow. So I agree that possibly a thinner one might actually balance it out with the lower historical structure.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions of anyone before I close the hearing? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and have the discussion here on the board. So, who would like to start?
I'll start with the eyebrows since that's fresh on everybody's
Start with the
mind.
eyebrows, okay.
I think the eyebrow, the removal of the eyebrow, I agree with kind of the comments. I think scaling it down is good. I think keeping the eyebrow on the building adds a little bit level of detail to it, where stripping all the detail to try to be subservient, in my opinion, kind of cheapened the look of the addition. So I think the comment kind of made in the first meeting about removing it all together, I personally don't agree with. I think a little bit scaled-down version and kind of the thoughts the consultant has made would be a good addition to what's been presented.
I do too.
Okay, yeah, good comment. Okay, anybody else? I'm gonna start with you, Chuck. What are your any comments?
None.
No. Greg?
I think I've already made my comments.
Okay. Catherine?
No comments.
I just wanted, to me, the main concern, and I'm just going to express it over and over again, is that the top does not overshadow the historical building itself. That's the most important thing to me. And if we can make that work, then I'd be happy with the addition. So colors, everything, whatever it takes to make sure that when we walk down the street, we don't just have our eyes draw right up to the top, that we actually see the old garage and can value it for the building that it is.
Thank you. Paul?
Well, I appreciate the changes the applicants made. I think, in my opinion, they've addressed many of the concerns on the board, and I like what I see, I guess.
I echo what Paul said. I really like the changes that you made, and I think it helps with the whole look and feel of the building and maintaining a more of a historical approach, yet still having the ability to have a nice restaurant and sun deck and make downtown lively. So I think it's great. I prefer not to have the eyebrow. I was kind of a big advocate of taking it off because I think it makes almost a building too interesting and kind of takes the, I don't know, draws your eye up a little bit. But if we wanted to go with a lighter one, I mean, if that's our recommendation as an option, I would go with the other board members to make something a little, just less heavy.
Okay, Mike?
I think this set of drawings is a great improvement to what we saw last month, and appreciate your level of detail and your ability to listen. I think it's a good plan, and I'm of two minds on whether that barrel roof ought to be visible from the west side or not. But I think this plan looks pretty good from that west side. So I'd like to say good work, and thanks for all of your trouble and time.
And I would echo what Mike says, and I think you've really addressed all of the items we were concerned about last month, and I also think it meets all of the criteria on the code, which is really what our purview is what is in the Historic Preservation Code, and I think we've certainly met that. I think from my notes, before we get to a motion, what is our agreement on the eyebrow? Are we deciding that we'll downsize from put it in the middle and let the consultants kind of give the final approval, or do we like it the way it is here, or I think we ought to give a little more direction on that?
I think we go with what Sharon had said, and that is leave it up to the consultants, but keep it where it does not overshadow or overpower the rest of the building. So there could be some horizontal banding up there that would not be offensive, but might actually enhance what you're trying to do.
Agree.
I agree with scaling it down, let the consultants make the final decision.
So to scale it down so that it more or
From the
less
first.
balances but doesn't stick out. Yeah. Like a sore thumb.
And again, I would say you did a great job in responding to our meeting last. The only two things that I see maybe to add to a motion would be the staff/consultant approval of all of the colors, the color board, including the wall, the back wall, and scaling down the eyebrow. Add a little bit of dimension, but scale it down would be the two items. Is everybody in agreement with that? So we're going to have two motions here.
Can I
Pardon me?
Just, I'm sorry, I do want to make one comment, and that is that I think it's a good project. I like what you've done. I cannot vote tonight, so at least I can express that good job.
You can vote on the second one, you just can't vote on the first one.
Margie, do we want to put in the motion that they can eliminate the eyebrow or add it back in, not as deep or not as, I don't know what the exact word is, not as prominent as the initial drawing, but leave it up to the consultants
Architects.
whether they keep it or.
And we can make that a
Okay, include
condition
that
of the mo- So we're going to do two motions, and let's do the first motion on the Broussard Motor Company certificate, COA number 1, and who would like to do a motion? Or we can,
I'll do it.
who wants to? Okay, Catherine.
Which one are we doing first? The
We're
2180?
doing version 2, and I would just go over the proposed motion on the back there, on the last page.
No, yeah, but the first one we're doing is 2180, isn't it? Let's identify our properties here.
2680.
26.
That'll be the first one. This is the one that
Okay.
Chuck and Greg are not going to vote on. And you
I
will.
move to approve the Broussard Motor Company Certificate of Historic Appropriateness located at 2680 West Main Street in the Main Street Historic District for the partial demolition of the building and the addition of the partial second floor and outdoor deck in order to accommodate a 2-story restaurant with outdoor space as described in detail in the revised application and its supporting attachments as they were presented and approved at the November 17th, 2014 public hearing with the provision that
The eyebrow.
staff and consultants have the authority to decide colors, as we've discussed, and to decide whether the eyebrow should be less prominent or taken away entirely.
Any discussion? The only thing I just noticed that wasn't in here that we need to add are the alterations to the front facade. We're also approving that.
The front, what
Wasn't
alteration?
in here. Where they're changing the windows in the front facade.
I think the fact that you, in your motion, you say "as presented tonight"
Presented.
pretty covers
Part of
that.
the
So would that
documents,
cover
That's
it
covered.
without saying that specifically? Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
We need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kristen. Any discussion? No. No. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Great. Okay, let's go to the second one. Chuck, you can vote in this, and Greg? You can all vote in this one, or you can't
But
vote.
Sharon does
You
not.
can't
I don't
vote.
vote, no. Chuck, you want to come back up here?
I'm comfortable.
I was comfortable down there.
Okay, who would like to make a motion on the second COA?
This is the one where we're not,
This is
Changing anything.
2170.
This is 2670.
2670, right.
so we're not changing anything on this, right?
No.
Version 1.
Pardon me?
Version 1.
Yes, version 1.
I can do it.
Okay.
I propose a motion to approve a certificate of historic appropriateness for the partial demolition and reconstruction of the Blue Ribbon Stables building located at 2670 West Main Street in the Main Street Historic District.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
I have just one comment I'd like to make. Because of the materials chosen on that back wall for 2680, I think that the item C, the proposed work is visually compatible with development on adjacent properties, is in this case true. I'm not so sure that it is going to fit. It's going to be interesting to see. And I think that's it's really a long stretch that is really different material than the historic structure. And I'm hoping, Sharon, like you pointed out, that the original building stays the primary focus and not the new addition or the demo. So what I heard you say is it's a defensible material. So good. That'll be good.
Any other discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing this.
Thank you.
Tell Mr.
In downtown.
Safadine thank you as well. It's a big
Yes.
investment. Margie, before we leave that, are there was a question raised about delivery trucks and access in the alleys. Is that something that really does get managed through code enforcement or through the police department if there's blocking there?
Well, the alley's actually public right-of-way, so, yeah, I would fall under traffic laws, basically. So if somebody is parking there, blocking access, it'd be a police matter.
Okay. And not related to anything, but Dennis, I'm thinking, remember back when the Blue Ribbon Stables, when we were looking at that the first time around, there was some feature inside the stables that was really unusual. Some place where the donkeys walked. There's some circular. Do you remember that? Okay. Maybe I had a dream about.
Dreaming about donkeys again?
There was some feature that I remember that we did talk about that was really unusual, and it was a round, circular thing that served some purpose that people knew about, and I don't remember if it survived the first.
Where's that one that
rehab?
The new agenda.
Okay. Any general business? Which is not on here. Comments, reports, staff. Dennis.
We sent out a couple emails about.
Give me 1 second.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you, Dina and Fred. Thank you very much for all of your effort, your time and effort, and doing this. You were very helpful, so thank you.
Yes, thanks for your
And
comments.
Kristen, thank you.
We sent out a couple of emails about the Saving Places Conference and the camp and some dates. Looks like there may be some scholarships for us because we were one of the more endangered places. And so that's one way to get scholarships. There usually is other scholarship money as well. So it may be a real opportunity for us to send a lot of people this year. If you are interested, it's always a good conference.
What's the date again, Dennis? Is it February 7th?
Yeah, that sounds right. Oh, yeah, it's in there. It's the first week in February, I think. So
I can send out another email.
Yeah, I can too.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
You know, and I would urge anyone that has not attended camp, which I think might just be Sharon and Mike, everybody else I think has been, it is absolutely a very, very good background.
We get to cook some more.
And I know you're working, it's on a Friday, but
My problem.
Bring your own s'mores.
if there's any way you two can get there,
Well,
I think
Mike-
you'll find it very worthwhile.
Mike, didn't you go, you went this year, didn't you?
I went to the one with Dan Corson downtown, which was just a day-long. Is this an overnight camp, Dennis?
Oh,
We
no.
get to bring sleeping bags?
No,
No.
of course, it's 3 days, but
3
not
days?
overnight.
It's one day, I
It's
think
in
it's
town,
on
but-
Friday, isn't it?
Campfire?
I guess you could stay downtown.
But it's
Be a little
very,
cold,
it's
I
very,
guess, on
very
February.
worthwhile.
Okay,
That's it.
that sounds great.
That's all you have? Okay, members. Is anybody on the board? Sharon, you can give us an update.
I don't have an update.
You don't? Okay, so you haven't had a meeting. Sonia, did you have anything? That's great. Okay, so that'll be the Historic Preservation Awards, and I don't know if HLI has done anything with that, if you need any help from me or anybody. Who should we award it to is what we're thinking. You're thinking probably. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about the United Methodist Church? Because I think we did give them an award one year. I can't remember which category. But I think
Presbyterians
I
got
think
one.
we have.
Methodists are mad.
Oh, maybe it was the Presbyterian Church. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the one on the corner of Windermere and Maine. It's a different one. Oh, I know which one. Okay. Different church. Okay. Great. Well, everybody mark your calendar, January 21st. Yeah. Okay. Okay, anything else? Okay, good. Thank you. Chuck, did you have something that, before I call in? I just don't see you down there.
I know.
You've got to yell at me.
I just, in terms of member things, I had two things. One, I just wanted to say, Pam, that I really don't think that urban renewal and historic preservation are mutually exclusive. And to the extent that anything that we do can benefit the direction that LIFT and the council seem to be heading, it'd be nice to be open to that discussion. I think that there are other urban renewal areas in Denver specifically that really capitalize on historic designation, so a great opportunity. And then I'd like to know how old Southbridge is. I'd like to know how old the bridge is. I think it's close to the designation
It's getting close.
age.
We've asked Charlie. We'll ask again. So.
I know. I'd like Charlie to answer the question. So
That area was platted about 1980, wasn't it, Chuck? Something?
no one knows.
Am I
I think
down
it's close to
about this?
40 years old. I think it's a historic, iconic Littleton structure. And before any decisions are made about anything else, I think that we should move to designate it as a historic structure as soon as we can.
Mm-hmm.
It's an iconic
As soon as
structure.
it becomes eligible.
It's got enough pigeons. It's owned by the city.
It'll be at the
so
top
you'll
of the
look that
list.
up, Dennis? Yeah. Okay. Anything else, and I'll just address the
Margie?
plan for a minute.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have just maybe one quick report about the COA and the review. Paul and Dan and myself have been working on that, and we've been doing some research from different cities around the nation just to see how everybody else does it, from Denver to Charleston to Ouray. But and it seems like that the guidelines are not so far off, and I think we're still want to continue working on that. But our initial comment is that we just need to really police it, and I think we've talked about that tonight at dinner, that we can be working on that with the consultants and ourselves and council as to what is appropriate as a submission, and there may be some variances depending on the applicant's resources, the type of project, the scale of the project, the details that need to be covered, but really police the submission so that it comes before the board in a pretty thorough manner. And Paul, if you want to add anything to that or not, but we are working on it. We don't have anything to necessarily present to you about it.
Yeah, all I wanted to add was I agree. I don't think the submission requirements are really out of line or too extensive. I mean, compared to other jurisdictions I've kind of looked through. I think the biggest issue is I was looking for them on the website. I'm an architect. looking for them. I know what I was looking for, and I couldn't find it. I mean, that in itself is how, I don't know how a homeowner would understand that the process is in place if they're not readily available or even viewable on the website. So I think that's kind of one big concern, at least, that we kind of talked about. But
Are you talking about the city of Littleton's or the other ones you were trying to
just
find?
the historic preservation, the requirements, am I in a historic district? And if I know I'm in the district, trying to find the submittal requirements on the website.
Okay, on our website.
On our website. There's a web page that has basically all the submittal packets. Some are for building departments, some are for planning, zoning. It's not in, at least I didn't see it on the page. Maybe I perused it too fast, but I looked through it a couple of times and it wasn't there.
Okay. No, I think you're right. It's not there.
Yeah. Let's see the other comment. Charleston would be an interesting one to look at because it kind of addressed basically what you were doing, were you just painting your house, you only had to do this. If you were going to change the windows, they really tailored it between residential and commercial projects, and I see that's where, the commercial projects I don't think is a big problem because generally there's an architect hired and they're familiar with the process, and so there's no, anguish in terms of who's submitting. It's the residential projects that I think we have the most grief from, being incomplete submittals or the applicant being upset because for one, they didn't know what they had to do or they don't understand the process, so then maybe that's kind of dialed back. But it was pretty interesting because there was a really good description of why are we doing this? Here's the process. I'm not suggesting that maybe Littleton does that, but I thought it was very interesting. It was well covered. So.
Well, and I think that with the consultants on board, that would really be helpful, like in the Louthon district or some smaller project where that they do need some consultant help. So.
Yeah, and I do recall that because I reviewed a couple of residential projects several years ago before we had consultants, and they would come in and try to submit something that was 20 feet into the front easement. Just not an understanding of the process whatsoever. Fortunately, he kind of understood, and Steve Ekman and I kind of walked him through it. But you can't build to your front lot line. Sorry, make the rules. We just enforce them. So
fundamentals.
Yeah, the basics.
Right.
So.
Anything else? And Mike, you can address when I do this. Kind of my intent on the work plan is maybe every meeting to quickly go through just the high priority and everybody give a report on the point person can kind of talk about that. I don't think we need to worry about medium priority right now. I think we have enough on the table with the other.
Can I ask something about medium priority, though? Because
Sure.
I am that person.
I
just
know.
wanted to get some clarification. I was going to go walk it this weekend, but last weekend, but I was like, never mind with the weather. But I'm getting ready to do it. And when I was reading it was saying, identify any historic alleys. What we're really saying is identify any historic buildings within the alley?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, because it says alleys, structures, and I was like, okay, well, is there such a thing as a historic alley? I don't think there is in Littleton. Okay.
I think so.
And what does it mean by or potential districts?
Well, I think at one point we were talking about other historic districts. We have Louthon District and we
Okay.
have Main Street District. And at one time we were talking about making Alamo Historic District, or there are other little pockets of things. And that's part of what on this ID, the identification of future landmarks and districts, that'll be part of that as well.
Okay.
So it's an assemblage of buildings, I would say, that we want to call a district.
Okay. So basically, right now, though, my purpose is to walk the alleys
Yeah,
and
to see
the
if there's any
structures
potential.
to look at the history.
Yeah.
Well, part
See if
of
there's
when I
any
was looking at the
potential
Boussard auto place,
Yeah.
I saw the alley there, and I was like, oh, wow, we really need to know what these alleys look like,
Yes,
and I think
yes.
it would be helpful for us to know. So, okay, I have a better understanding
Yeah.
of that. Okay.
Guys, could you refresh my memory why we haven't really designated any buildings lately since
Because-
2009? That's kind
Well,
of
because we haven't worked on it is probably, we got kind of hung up, and Catherine has agreed to be the point person on the idea of future landmarks and districts, and I think we got kind of hung up on the list of merit. Remember when we were working on the list of merit, and then we decided to not have a list of merit?
right. Is that,
And I think we need to go back and address that again, and I think that's
I would agree.
true. I think it's definitely under our purview to look at potential districts and landmarks.
I would agree, and especially with the mid-century modern on the east side of downtown. I
Yeah,
mean, that's,
that Pam mentioned, I think we need to work on
I
that.
agree. There's some neat buildings over there, and they're getting to a point where they're getting run down enough that nobody would even think about tearing one down. And I think that would be a really big loss to the city.
And I think, Dennis, you've tried to get money to do a survey there too, haven't you? Tried to get a grant?
And that was camp. It was in 2014 in most endangered places.
Right.
Yes.
Sure was. Right. Yeah, we didn't get any money on the first round. We may try again next year. We'll see.
Yeah. I'm going to go down here quickly on the Lounthan House Historic District Preservation Design Guidelines, and I know that staff. And it had application due November 17th, which is today. So did that get
It's
in?
in. We still have to massage it a little bit, but it's in. So.
Okay, good. So we'll see how that goes. Possible property tax rebate. Mike, did you want to address that?
Sure. Dennis was extremely helpful. I'll pass out some handouts for you. And, I want to thank Dennis for giving me all the information, help me put all this stuff together. So in keeping with our idea of maybe bringing this up with council in January, I thought I could try to get this on the table now so that we could start developing some comments and reactions to it. And I take really no pride of authorship, and it's certainly not exhaustive or exclusive for what the ideas here are. But the background is that under our code, historic properties are eligible for a tax rebate unless they're in our district, the historic Main Street district. So the idea then is to perhaps encourage council to examine a tax rebate for properties that are either opted in or would opt in. So I tried to look at this and try to figure out a philosophy that we would collectively adopt. There are 30 properties in the district which have opted in and are now under the guidelines. 23 properties within the boundary are not opted in. Of the properties which have opted in, Dennis's reports tell me that there are about 115,000 square feet of commercial space. And the tax rebate, right, Dennis, only applies to commercial space, correct? Okay. And the tax revenue generated by the city is $36,158. Of the properties which have not opted in, there are 93,000 square feet of commercial space, and the tax revenue generated for the city is $21,317. So part of what we're trying to do is encourage additional properties to opt in, and so the question then is, are we more in favor of rewarding those property owners who have already opted in, and by doing so encourage others to opt in to take advantage of a potential tax rebate, or do we wish to incentivize those we wish to opt in, possibly at the expense of those already opted in? So I think that's the crucial question that we have to answer. So I threw together about 5 options and tried to figure out what the fiscal impact to the city would be. Option 1 would be if we do it just for properties opting in that have not opted in yet. But this would be for kind of like we do with the historic grant program, where in that first year, if there were 100% of the city taxes paid, the amount would vary from a low of $337 to a high of $4,099. The median amount is $929, and the average is about $1,200. The I.W. Hunt building at, where's that, Dennis? 2329 West Main is...
Right, it's at Sycamore and Main. Yeah.
Sycamore and Main is not in the district, and that has the highest amount of taxes that they pay not being in the district.
Maybe they'll come in.
If all properties which are not now in decided to opt in the first year, the cost to the city in lost tax revenue would be $21,317. So the question is, does offering a one-year rebate offer enough incentive to have additional property owners opt in? Does this unfairly penalize those owners who have been in the district? Those who have already opted in and see the benefits of being included as opt-ins may view this as a positive offering to encourage additional properties to opt in, despite the fact that they themselves are not receiving a tax rebate benefit. I guess that would be, each individual property owner would have to make that determination. Those who have recently opted in have an advantage, as we've determined, for grant money, because that prior year opt-in gives you extra points if you're applying for a grant. So, they're would not necessarily be eligible for other incentives, but there are some outlined in our code, matching funds through certified local government, local preservation, and state and national programs per the Historic Preservation Code. So it wouldn't necessarily be through us, but it could be through other groups. Correct, Dennis?
Correct.
And if I'm wrong, Dennis, feel free to...
You're great. Okay.
So option 2 would be to explore a 5-year tax rebate, which would phase in or phase out for those newly opting in. For example, if this were done on the basis of 100%, 80, 60, 40, 20, over 5 years, the cost would be, you can see at $21,317 and sliding down to $4,200 in the 5th year, or $63,000 total. And again, this would be ones for properties that would just be coming into the district, not ones that are already in the district. These numbers assume 100% opt-in of properties which have not currently opted in.
That sounds like a tongue twister.
I had to say that 3 times fast in practice. Option 3 would be offer a rebate to all properties in the district which have opted in, including currently opted in, plus those which choose to opt in. If a 1-year rebate were offered, the cost to the city would be $57,475 if all eligible properties are included. So if everybody opted in, that would be the cost for 1 year for 100% of the tax that's payable to the city. If current opt-in properties are incentivized, would it encourage more to opt in? If so, would it make sense to do it at 100% or a rate less than 100%? And I think that's the key question that we have to answer is, would we do 50%, 75, 25? I've written some numbers down here that give you what the fiscal impact would be to the city. And does it make sense for this rebate to more closely mirror that of the code section 4612 and have it extend for more than 1 year, up from 0, well, have to be more than 0, but up to 100% of the city tax. A couple of other options would be perhaps freeze city property taxes on buildings which have opted in for a period of time and allow taxes on buildings which have not opted in to rise with each reassessment. Assuming that taxes will rise with time, incentivizes those who have opted in. I don't know what the cost to the city would be because we don't know what those taxes are going to be, but that's a possibility as well. And then option 5 would be to offer a higher amount of a rebate if property owners opt in the first year so that you, in effect, penalize the holdouts. So if you opted in the first year, you get a higher rebate than you would if you opted in the second year or third or fourth or fifth. And then, after 5 years, maybe there's nothing available for you. So these were just some ideas I came up with. And the last page is all the properties within the boundaries. And the top half are those that are not in. There's commercial square feet, their addresses, what the historical name of the building was, and what their city property taxes are. And then the bottom half is are all the properties that are in the district. And some of the averages are a little skewed because, for example, on the top, Kraft Building, Dana Downtown Grocery, and Kalinowski Bakery are all part of that Littleton Independent assemblage there. So that's why it's the numbers don't quite match up, but they're close enough, I think, for discussion purposes. So that was my first stab at it.
It was a good job. That's good, Mike.
Very good.
Really good.
Very good.
Sign 3 more items to him.
Hey, set a precedent.
What else would you like to do? I have a question. Glenn, do we have a schedule with City Council
No.
to
not
meet with
yet.
them? Or do you think?
Actually, I don't think they haven't projected into January yet, so we'll watch for a date and get you a date for a joint meeting you're talking about.
Yeah, for our joint meeting. My other question is, do we have any COAs that are coming up that you know of? Because I think maybe we might want to devote our December meeting to this and preparing for the city council meeting.
Or you
and
could
really
celebrate Christmas,
talk
too.
a lot
That's-
about this. What's that? I know it's Christmas, but
Just an idea.
if we're meeting with city council in January, we need to have some prep time, I think.
What's the date of the next?
We don't know what the date is yet.
We don't know.
January.
No, what's the date of our next meeting? It would be
Oh,
December.
It's the third week in,
Right. So what day is that?
I don't know, Ann's looking it up here, I think.
Okay.
you need a calendar for something that complicated.
I think this is very good, Mike. I think it might be, I know at least for me, I'd love to take it and digest it and maybe really have a big discussion on it.
Yeah, that was kind
The
of the
next
idea, just to
meeting and really have our ducks in a row for when we meet
And
with
have
city
one that
council.
one or two that we think,
It's the 15th.
let's
The
put this one
15th?
forward.
that we have a consensus on and then
Yeah,
go to the
consensus on and,
council as a-
Recommendation.
and I guess maybe another question I have,
Chair, it's December 15th.
Okay.
December 15th, okay. I'm not to discuss this because this is being videotaped. Never mind. Okay. Thank you, Mike. But I think all of us, why don't we all take this and come back, next month. I mean, I would love to not have a meeting too, but I think, especially with the city
Well,
council.
but we're
meeting
not
come up.
guaranteed we're going to have a meeting or council in January
No.
anyway.
No.
Why don't we wait to see if we get
Prepare.
on their schedule?
Yeah, if we can
We
get
can
on
always do
the,
a special meeting, can't we? If we get on the agenda.
As long as we
yeah,
post.
we can. Well, why don't we for now plan to have a December meeting and then we'll kind of,
If we're going to meet with council in January.
yeah.
Okay, so if maybe the meeting with council slides to February, perhaps we
Yeah.
we could
We just
forego
need
the
some
December meeting.
preparation time.
Okay.
January meeting.
But I think this is very good, and I think if all of us take this and read it and come back, and so we can all discuss it, good job. And Dennis, too.
Mike did all the analysis. Great.
Yeah, that's great. Review the current COA submission, we talked about that.
Thought we were done.
Identification of future landmarks and districts, Catherine has agreed to be the point person on there. You might want to add her on there. Pardon me? Did I not say that right?
I'm being smartass.
And I think probably first steps there, and I think all of us can certainly help with that. I mean, would be to kind of figure out a plan, come up with a plan of attack. And as I say, I think HLI will help on that.
Yeah, I would like to, I think that's our first priority is to decide how we want this to go and what we want it
And what
to
is the
be.
goal and how
What is
do
it
we
going
get
to
there?
be? Because we don't want to go back and revisit what we've already done and crashed, so.
And I know Andrea had given us, and I know I have it all, some recommended historic districts and things. I don't know if you have them, but I can try to find mine and get them to you.
Well, I know, and I've had conversations with Dennis in the past about ideas about various little clumps of places around town.
And I-
So
and I
I
can
think
find
there's,
those maps again,
there's
too.
no shortage of information or, ideas of what to do. So I think we just need to know what the direction is.
Right, and I think that's,
Want it to
that's
go.
definitely first steps.
Yeah.
And I think we should look at addressing this mid-century modern on Littleton Boulevard could be one of our high priorities there.
Yeah.
Except it would be nice to have the surveys before we did that. Develop list of architects and contractors. Are we anywhere there? Have any discussions with Kristen on that?
Yeah, I don't know if Dennis has discussed with Kristen. So the idea was a group of kind of certified architects that people can use for their design.
And I think a lot of that has, if a homeowner comes in here with their own drawings and some architects we can refer to.
And it's something typically that as staff we say we can't do. We can give you sometimes a name of 10 people that we've actually had applications from, but we can't recommend anybody. And I would think that may be the same situation, whereas I think HLI perhaps, similar to what Historic Denver does, they have lists as independent groups Maybe that's something HLI could look at as well. And I'll ask Kirsten too if we've got more flexibility
ask
for the
if-
board than we have for staff.
I don't really know
If
how to do that.
the three architects on the board could do that, or are we under the same liability?
Exactly. I don't know either in terms of quality.
I don't think you can
Yeah,
recommend.
whoever's done business
Yeah.
is what we do. Yeah.
Just
So
give
we
them a
don't know
list.
quality of what they've done necessarily. It's going to be the problem. We wouldn't have the evaluations from the homeowners or the property owners as to how the project went.
Maybe if you could maybe ask Kristen, what is her recommendation on what we do, and then we'll go from there.
And aren't we looking just to list architects and contractors that have historical preservation
Yes.
experience?
Right.
So if we just found all of them in the Denver area and listed, I mean, there's not that many. I would think that, I don't know, but maybe we could just put those down.
We could. I don't know. I mean,
It's just who they are.
for the
We don't have a
architects, I
list.
mean, is that precise enough, or is it something that's more open than that? I certainly, when you talk to the state, for example, we can get a list of consultants who work on specific projects like design guidelines or historic inventories and surveys. So they'll give us a list of, again, not recommendations, but here are the people we know that do exist. So we might be able to do something like that if it's something finite enough. I don't know if it's not.
That list might be different than architects who actually complete design projects
Right.
and submittals too.
Right.
So
That's my question.
and you could do a public notice and have people submit their name to be on the list, but there's.
Right.
That's one way to do it without really endorsing anybody special.
It's kind of like we have a list for people that we give RFPs to, that type of thing. You have a list you put together. Yeah.
Well, maybe we can see what her take is on it.
Sure. Well,
and
that's a good question.
go from there.
But the public notice might at least generate a list of architects who are interested in doing that type of work, and then you could pass that on versus a homeowner going, okay, now where do I start? At least then it's a list of interested architects.
Okay. Chuck, do we have any report on the Littleton Fine Art, on the Depot Art Gallery, or what's the status of that?
I really don't, Margie. The real first step in this process is to find out if this is a grant process or proposal that the city of Littleton would champion as well. Since it's the city's building, as the owner of the building, it's imperative that you're behind, and let's say I'm looking at the staff, the city is kind of behind the application, because if not, then it's just running on ice. And that question then ties back into other priorities and grants that you all might be looking at.
So similar to a grant that we got for Bemis, for example, the Bemis House, where the
Yes.
city actually was the applicant.
Yes. And I know that took staff time and staff resources, and the question needs to be answered because it's still a City of Littleton building.
It is still a City of Littleton building. We also have some experience with the building next door, which is owned by the city. It has a tenant in it who has a lease. That tenant actually came in for an application for one of the historic preservation grants,
Right.
as you recall.
Right.
And so we had some question about, is that appropriate for a city building to be getting that? Decided it was actually going to the tenant, not to the property owner, in this case, which was us, as the tenant, which I think is the same situation as the Guild, has a responsibility for maintenance. And I think the Guild may be in that same situation, where even though it's the city's building, the maintenance is their responsibility. And so how they get it funded is somewhat separate from the ownership, if that makes any sense. We may not be as interested, so to put it bluntly, I guess.
Okay.
So
That helps to hear that kind of just.
That
doesn't mean that we wouldn't be interested, but yeah, it'd be a little different. So.
But why wouldn't they? I mean, I just don't get it. It's a little gem of a building. The city owns it. Why wouldn't they want to maintain it? I just don't get what the process
Well,
is.
it's like any other building that you own. You have a tenant who has that responsibility, and that's their responsibility. It doesn't say that we're not interested. I don't know. But we have put a lot of money into it over the years, I know, and we certainly have done different grant programs through the city as well as individual funding.
Well, are they actually a tenant, though? Do they pay rent?
I don't know if they do or not.
How does that work
I don't know.
exactly?
So let me ask the question maybe a little bit differently.
Okay.
If I worked with the depot to prepare a grant submission for maintenance of the building, would the city be supportive of that effort?
I'll turn to you.
I guess it would, again, I'd have to go back and see what the lease says.
Okay, so would you do that, please? Because I really don't want to spend time working on this effort if I come back then and the city says, oh, we're really not interested. And so the first step is to know whether or not the city will support that application process. And Margie, this is great. I thank you for trying to, to shepherd the cats.
I'm trying to keep us focused.
It's got a
here.
lot of information on it, and I would ask moving forward, let's start adding the date at which point in time we as a historic preservation board add projects to the list. Because I think some of these items that are short-term priority have been there for a long time.
That's right.
And I think it'd be good to kind of hold ourselves accountable and to hold staff accountable in terms of prioritization that we're looking at so that we can really be a little more
Well, and I agree, and
directive.
this is something that I'll bring up every month, just so you guys know. Be seen. And I don't think, I think it's important to have a point person. It doesn't mean that point person has to do all of the work, but I think that point person needs to delegate if need be. I'm not saying that you have to do I think we need to work as a team, obviously, and if you need help, we'll do that. So, okay, so that's the next step there then, Dennis, is to find out if the city would be amenable to doing anything before we go further. Okay. Entry signs of Arapahoe Hills. Paul, where are we on that? You wanted that moved up to, what do we need to do to get that moving?
I brought it up. I didn't know it was in my court to do anything about it.
You got it.
I got it?
You got it. Where do
do
we go from here?
Do I need to write a grant? Is that?
I don't know.
what
How do
this
we
is
go
saying?
about this?
I was looking for a couple of
Do you have a
plaques.
proposal for, if you could come to us with some ideas of what that might look like and what it might be?
Sure.
And if there's some examples, what does Arapahoe Acres have, for example? Because it's a National Historic District as well. That might be a comparable one. Do we talking about just a standard
I
aluminum
was
plaque
originally
that goes
just
up?
thinking a little brass plaque to
Yeah,
put
that-
on the monument sign
yeah.
to the neighborhood.
Okay, that
Just
would-
so it designate, that
It would go on the
people driving
exist-
down Lowell understands it's part of a historic
Right.
district.
It would go
And
on
maybe
the-
the neighbors understand that, so when they bring in their
as they come
COA,
in,
then.
that's right.
Paul, have you been to Arapahoe Acres at all in that area?
Oh, yeah.
Because they have those little wooden,
No, those are street
those little
signs,
wooden
though.
signs.
No, this is more of kind of like the plaques that are on the Main Street buildings. This building is designated as a historic landmark. That's
So you're thinking about
Oh,
putting it on the
you're
gateway
putting
signs,
it
Paul?
on the buildings.
At the corners?
not each house,
No,
so
but
we're
each-
talking
at the
about just
gateway.
a couple
Yeah.
of brass plaques.
Okay.
One minimum.
Okay.
There's kind of a makeshift sign added on the corner of Berry and Manitou. That one's
Right.
not original to the neighborhood, so
Oh, it's
maybe
not?
just
Okay.
one on
Okay,
Lowell there, Lowell and Arrowhead.
Okay.
By the daycare.
okay.
Or no, it's actually blocked down. It's on Lowell and
Yeah.
Smile.
Would that be something that maybe you could design a sign and then submit it and see if we can get funding
think if-
for it? It wouldn't be that expensive, would
I'll
it?
do a little
Up with a
research.
design, I mean, if we're talking 2 plaques, we can just do that.
Yeah, I
I'm
think it
thinking
just
because
needs
it's on the National Historic Register, they may have a kind of a canned standard
I
sign.
think they might too.
I'm
Yeah,
guessing they
exactly.
do.
I think
So
if we go
let me look
online.
I'll check.
Yeah, I think and then we
So
can
the
just
city
submit
could
it.
find budget for that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Not too
I'll
expensive.
do some research and find a design, and I'm thinking it's a pretty standardized plaque, being the National Register. So let me do some checking.
Okay.
I'll get back to you.
Good. High priority ongoing, I think increased participation. I think we ought to wait to see what happens with the property tax rebate before we go back to our people. Are you guys okay with that? Something to go back to all of our people who are trying to get into the district. Go back with something new. Biannual meeting with City Council, you're going to work on a date on that. Historic Preservation Awards, Dennis, maybe you could put in there January 21.
Yeah.
Just change that date in there.
Okay, good.
Now, the Main Street Grant Program, too, I know we have in process February, March, but I think Mark was going to come back to us with some revisions to the process.
Yeah, he wanted to have a study session, I think, in terms of, what.
So we
what-
probably need to have him do something early next year.
Oh, right.
One of the things we've kicked around, I know we changed the standards last year as order to provide an incentive to opt in. I guess what would help us out considerably is if we could come up with a set standards so we don't have to reinvent the wheel each year. We could start earlier then, but if the grants if we could standardize them, it would be very helpful.
You're talking about the grant program?
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Right. As far as the rules and the criteria, it seems like we
Well, I
tweak them
think
every year.
I thought we had them all standardized, but then I think I missed the meeting where the last grant round where everybody, I think they wanted 120 grand and we only had 50, and
Right.
I think everyone felt that we ought to
Well, I
make
think
some changes to it in case that happens. I don't know. I wasn't at that meeting.
Well, we provided incentives for newly opted in, and then we had the bank, and then I think no one was happy with what they wanted to do with their grant funds, so.
So
that's
based
all
on
I
what
ask,
happened on
but-
the last grant round, we have to make some revisions maybe.
Yeah. If we could just kind of standardize the process so we don't have to go through
I would
create the
agree.
rules and then implement the rules each year, that would be helpful.
And I think that would be helpful for everyone, including the applicants.
Right, right.
And I think we thought we had it, but I think there were some problems last. So I would just remind Mark that he needs to
Want to just go
get
with
with us on that.
what we did last year, then?
I would say go with what we did last year unless there was a problem with some of the rules that created some controversy.
I think there were some inconsistencies that we may be able to deal with in-house, so just with staff, just between the application and the different things that he was looking at, so it's questions we'd be able to answer, so.
Because I remember hearing something, again, I wasn't at that meeting, about that there needed to be some revisions made based on that last grant round. So I don't know. But anyway, I think we need to get Mark on that.
I have one question about just the amount of funds. Is that determined by City Council just on their own, or is there input from you all staff? Because you kind of know what is coming up and coming in, and it seems like we're stuck at 50,000, even though we went down to 25, we're back to 50.
Yeah, to be honest, we do it every budget year, so I guess if the board wants more, we would have to make that ask at the budget hearing.
I guess I'd want to know if you think it would be favorable. I mean, it's always easier to give more money away and get more people interested in maintaining their properties too, but
all I could say is the council did up the grants for small businesses. So that was at 50 grand. They went up to 75 2 years ago, I believe, and I think it held there. So that's what you're competing against. And then we've also put in, we have now a art grant of 25 grand and a neighborhood grant of 50 grand. So everybody's getting in on the grant thing, so that's kind of your competition.
I think, Margie, we should have
What's the neighborhood grant?
Point of discussion on one of our next meetings.
Okay.
What's the neighborhood grant?
How much money in the grant fund?
The neighborhood grant is a neighborhood organization, doesn't have to be an HOA, can come to us for some kind of public improvement, and whether it be in the right-of-way or in open space or a plaque at the entrance to your neighborhood or street signs.
50 grand will cover it, I think.
That's the total budget.
That's right.
I have one question on Margie. As relates to that, Glenn, does Littleton get any revenues from gaming taxes to encourage or to help historic preservation? I remember one of the issues in talking about, was it Amendment 67 or 68 about the Arapahoe Park gaming, was that those monies would then be diverted from the current uses if Black Hawk and Cripple Creek and so forth if their tax revenues were down, those would be redirected to schools. But currently, some portion of those taxes are paid for historic preservation.
Yeah, we do not get those funds directly. They go to the state historic preservation fund, and so when we go for a grant, for example, to renovate the courthouse or to renovate the Bemis House or to design guidelines anywhere in the city, those are paid for by the gaming funds.
Okay, so this $50,000 that we're dealing with is not part of that. Okay,
no.
Thanks.
I would say I know we should talk about. I agree about increasing that. When I was just walking the other day, saw the Masonic temple's fixed. Looks a lot better. I mean, we have to. I mean, council should want that. So but then I walked to the other areas that we didn't allow, and you could see, and it's looking shabby. And so I think we should, for more than just being historical, but also the look of Main Street in Littleton. So I think it'd be worth talking about.
It seems like if we don't ask, we're probably not going to get any.
I was just going to say, let's ask and let them, give them a
Leave money
chance
on
to
the
say
table.
yes.
But I think when we do talk about it, that we discuss it's more than just historical preservation, but it's also aesthetics and
That's
the way that we're presented.
All the
because they're trying to
benefits.
do their way. Yeah, they're
What are the benefits of historic
exactly
preservation?
It's more right, and I don't know
I
that
would
they've
agree.
got that yet.
The other things listed under medium priority, I know Sharon's working on alleys, which I think is great.
Yeah, I'll probably bring
The others, I think, can,
pictures next month.
yeah.
You
yeah.
can put that on the timeline if you want.
Okay, to be discussed is on there, so
Yeah, so I'll probably bring that at the 12:15 meeting.
how about if I say in process?
Okay.
Any other comments on the work plan? Everybody's working, right? So Dennis, there's 3 changes for next time.
Okay.
If on identification of future landmarks and districts, just add Catherine as the point person.
Okay, great.
Then on the Historic Preservation Awards, make that status January 21.
Okay.
And then ID of future landmarks and districts, the alleys, the very end, put in process.
Okay, good.
Anybody else say anything else? Those 3 changes, and so we'll come back either December or January and really discuss Mike's memo.
Yes.
Which is great, and everything else on our work plan. Does anybody have anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. Great, all in favor?
Aye.
I don't think there's anybody opposed, is there? Thank you.